JusticeforJake&Ella.com. We have a new sponsor, Terra Community College. You probably just saw the promo for Terra Community College. Next week on Monday and Tuesday, it's Instant Admissions Day at Terra Community College in Fremont. You can go to the campus and get assistance and be enrolled relatively quickly. So check that out at the college's website. But thank you to Terra Community College for being a sponsor of Between the Lines. And today's program features the Larios family. Mike and Shannon Larios, whose 19-year-old son Jacob died by a gunshot wound to the head in March 2nd. Before they're on the program, though, I'm here with reporter Emil Whitus. Did I get that right?
You got it right this time, Matt. Nice job.
Emil's been a reporter with us for a year now?
Year and a half.
18 months.
About time for that raise.
It is. Long past due and well earned, I would say.
Oh, thank you.
But Emil's been working on this story since March, and we wanted to start out with Emil so we can just sort of set the stage, and then a little bit later in the program we're going to be joined by Mike and Shannon Larios of Castalia.
Yep.
And their attorney, Dan McGookie, who's also a blogger at SanduskyRegister.com, just coincidentally, with his Mortgage Matters blog each week. I'm not sure that's the right title, but you can read that at SanduskyRegister.com.
Just look for the last name McGookie. You can't miss it.
Yes. And as I mentioned, this story began in March, early March. What was it, March 2nd?
It was March 2nd. We were in the newsroom about 9 o'clock. Call comes over the scanner. Shots fired, someone down, I think it was, and so I race out there, and there's all kinds of sheriff's deputies out there, people bawling all over the place, and so I walk up to the scene. It's blowing, it's windy, it's cold, it's March, and I'm trying to get some information on this, and this is where, for me, the story starts. I get the runaround from several Sandusky County Sheriff's deputies who say, "Oh yeah, we'll be out in a second. We'll be out in a second." The next thing I know, they're wheeling a body bag out. Still have no answers as to what's going on inside. It's obvious there's several young people inside the house, and then the body bag comes out. A girl comes up to me and says, "A man's been shot. What are you doing here?" And of course, I mean, our job as reporters is to figure out what's going on in a situation like that. And in this case, it was so much more true that actually, it ended up being, I mean, at that point, my whole job came, I mean, I don't know how to say it. But anyways, moving on,
let me just stop you. You know, there's nothing unusual about a reporter being at a crime scene.
Right.
It's not like you're trying to get in the house. You're trying to find someone in charge who will say to you, "We will talk with you in a few minutes."
And this is where
we'll have nothing for you until later.
And this is where the red flags started to come up. I mean, I'm getting the runaround, and finally, after being out in the cold for about 4 hours, I canvassed neighbors. No neighbors really knew anything about what was going on over there. Came back to the crime scene. Everyone keeps saying Sheriff Kyle Overmeyer he'll come out and talk to you. About 3 o'clock rolls around, 3 a.m. that is, on March 3rd. I'm still out there, and the last sheriff's deputy car it just rolls out into the night, and I'm just left there in the middle of County Road 2, actually I don't even remember what it is, but anyways, out in the middle of the county, and they're all gone.
Okay.
You know, and then we get into this thing later that night. I come back to that morning, I come back to the newsroom, we call Overmeyer up, and he says he can't release any information, blah, 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 and I believe it was the next day we got a report that said that Jacob Larios, 19, had shot himself. And it was ruled a suicide, and I mean,
at that time, did they say it might have been an accident?
No, it was ruled it was ruled a suicide, and I remember Annie Zelm was the reporter for the weekend, and she said, "Well, this is kind of suspicious," but then it just kind of got swept away, and I'll take the credit. I mean, I'll take the blame for letting it get swept away, but the big story here is that we kind of let it go, and then Sandusky County deputies, they don't want to do anything on it. So really, the only one left asking questions is the family,
Right.
Mike and Shannon, and yeah, I mean, it's just they've powered this whole investigation from day one, and really nothing had been done on it until they brought in Dan McGookie, who started
Attorney Dan McGookie.
Their family attorney Dan McGookie, who started to push the envelope, and finally, I believe it was a couple months ago. I can't even remember what month he came to us.
So let me just put this synopsis, and you correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
We learn of a shooting on March 3rd. We go to the scene. We're there for about 4 hours. There's nothing unusual about this. Generally, an official in charge will come out and they'll give you an update. They'll tell you where you can get information, how you can get information. As you mentioned, it's our job to report this information, and we have a right to the information as members of the public. It's as simple as that. Being reporters doesn't enhance our right, and it doesn't diminish our right. It is our right. A public official wants the community to know, but Sheriff Overmeyer, who's there for about 4 hours, walks away without informing the community of anything.
Right.
That's fine. The next day, we're informed that this was a suicide.
Right.
And generally, newspapers, this newspaper, we don't follow suicides with any depth.
Right.
You know, in a private home. It's a private act. It's not a public act. It's a private citizen, and we don't follow suicides. So we're told it's a suicide, and we drop the story.
Right.
Which is what we do.
But there's also some underlying things that make it that if we had looked at it a little bit closer, we would have been able to see that there was something wrong.
Right. Except we're trained to a certain level to accept the information we receive from public officials.
Right.
If it isn't obviously suspect.
Well, and I think that's what this whole thing comes down to, is it affirmed the fact that, I mean, a lot of times I question about pushing for information and things like this, but in this case, it made it very clear that it's very important that people question the information that's given to them. You got to assume that people are pretty much as intelligent on the same level, no matter where they're social or where they're at in
Right.
the power scheme.
And so what you're suggesting is your editors sometimes push you real hard to question public officials.
Well, yeah, and I push myself too,
Right.
but I mean, there's a little schizophrenic. I don't know.
Sometimes you
something,
question that.
Right.
It's natural to question it.
Right.
I question it. Should we push this hard? In this case, the Sandusky County coroner ruled this a suicide, but 19-year-old Jacob Larios might not have known the gun was loaded.
And that's where the whole thing hinges, right?
It's an accidental suicide.
Right, which is an absolute oxymoron.
It doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense at all, because for it to be a suicide, you have to have a gun in your hand, you have to know that it's loaded, and you have to pull the trigger with the intent to kill yourself.
Exactly.
And in the coroner's report, it explicitly states that Jacob may not have known that the bullet or that the gun was loaded, even if there's a shadow of a doubt there, then you cannot rule that as suicide.
Okay.
There's no way.
So, just to finish this up, so the Register walks away from this story, and we move on to other stories because we don't think there's a whole lot to cover here. We weren't aware that Mike and Shannon Larios were trying to get information from Sandusky County officials for 7 months to get basic answers to their questions, and they were effectively being ignored.
Right.
It wasn't until Attorney Dan McGookie contacted us and said, here's what we learned.
Right.
Here's what we know. And that's when we went back to pick up the story.
Right. And at that point, they had just finished up exhuming Jacob's body from, I think it was a Castelia cemetery somewhere, And they sent it over to Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, I believe, to Dr. Cyril Wecht for an autopsy, the first autopsy that had been done on a death that occurred in a house with 3 other young people, a pistol, alcohol. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. This should be a no-brainer for an autopsy automatically.
A gunshot death.
Right.
No autopsy. They didn't retrieve the bullet. They didn't even know. They hadn't even confirmed that the gun that was found at the scene was the gun that caused the death, because they left the bullet in the ceiling.
Which the bullet was recovered, I believe, about a month ago.
Yeah, 7 months after the death.
So it would have been 7-8 months after the death.
Yeah. So that's where we're at now, and we're going to take a break now, and we're going to come back with Mike and Shannon Larios and their attorney Dan McGookie to get us an update as to where we stand now. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a short break with this message from our sponsor, Terra Community College. Next Monday and Tuesday is Instant Admissions Day at the college. You can go there, get assistance, and guide your path forward to your brighter future. So check that out at the college's website. We'll be back in just a few moments with Mike and Shannon Larios and attorney Dan McGookie.
Need college knowledge? During Terra's Instant and Middays, you'll get fast, free acceptance. Change your life in an instant, December 17th and 18th at Terra State Community College. Learn more at terra.edu.
Are you the only one still using the book? Get found at firelands411.com. Half of the internet users today will use a search engine to find a business. Make sure you're found at firelands411.com, an all-local business directory with phone numbers, addresses, and more. Your customers are looking for you. Claim your free listing today at firelands411.com.
Find your passion in healthcare at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu.
We're back. This is Between the Lines Live at SanduskyRegister.com. I'm Matt Westerhold, managing editor of the Register, and I'm joined now by Mike Larios. Am I saying that correct? Larios.
Yeah.
Shannon Larios and attorney Dan McGookie.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for being on the program today. I know this has been a horrible year for your family, and I extend our condolences from the Register sincerely. You have our sympathy, and I'd like to know where you're at right now with the investigation. You had filed a lawsuit. Dan, talk about that lawsuit, why you felt it was necessary to file a lawsuit.
Yeah, we filed a lawsuit in Sandusky County Common Police Court on October the 19th under a statute, quite frankly, until this case, I never knew that it existed. But essentially what the law says, in a pretty straightforward, under the statute, it allows a common police court where a person dies under mysterious circumstances. It allows the common police court to conduct a hearing into the, quote, manner, mode, and cause of death. In other words, in the law, in Ohio, in the law, the coroner is essentially actually the chief law enforcement officer. And but under this statute, given the power to the common police court has essentially the power to overrule the coroner's finding. And in this case, one of the things that has been a mystery to us since the beginning is, as you know, in the death certificate, it indicates that Jacob Larios died. The official cause of death was suicide. but then it goes on and says Jacob may not have known the gun was loaded. So that's an oxymoron in itself.
Right. Now let me ask you. So effectively, the lawsuit triggered a coroner's inquest,
Yes.
which is reviewing the information that was investigated by Sandusky County Sheriff Kyle Overmeyer and his team.
Correct.
And so it's a restart,
Yes.
effectively.
Right.
And part of the issue for you is your son's death certificate effectively says he committed suicide, but it might have been an accident. Why would Coroner John Wookie say such an incomprehensible thing on a death certificate?
Well, I guess you're.
Have you asked that question?
I've never talked with Dr. Wookie. When I got involved in this case, which was in early April of this year, now the death occurred on March the 2nd, so Mike and Shannon came to me about a month after frustration and getting nowhere in dealing with several Sandusky County officials. That's when I got involved. I did not make an effort to reach out to Dr. Wookie for probably a good month and a half to 2 months, in fairness to Dr. Wookie. I was dealing with the sheriff, or one of the people in the sheriff's department. I was dealing with Tom Steyerwalt, the prosecutor. Essentially, my goal at that point in time was to get the people over there to move off dead center and conduct an autopsy, which had never been done.
Now,
Yeah, go
it's a death by gunshot, and I think you mentioned to me one time that an autopsy is required under the law. Is that what you?
No.
In a mysterious circumstance.
No, no,
Okay.
it's not required under the law,
All right.
but there are protocols that I understand, and I don't hold myself out as an
Sure.
expert, Matt, on this, but I understand that there's a group, for example, it's called the Ohio Coroners Association.
Okay. Standard practice, best practice.
They have their own best practice
Okay.
rules, and I can't, certainly cite that
Okay.
chapter and verse,
Sure.
but essentially, I would. It's fair to say that under the rules promulgated by that association, given the circumstances of this case, there should have been an autopsy, without a doubt. There should have
Okay.
been an autopsy.
Now, you didn't get involved until about a month after Jacob's death.
Correct.
What was your experience, in that first month? Did you call and ask? Who did you call and ask? Who was your contact at the sheriff's office?
Captain Maggot.
Okay, and how do you remember calling him? What was your first concern when you called him? Do you remember?
We were in shock for a good week or two.
You were shocked by your son's death.
Right. We couldn't fathom that he would kill himself.
Okay.
And then we started getting some inconsistencies and some stories that we were hearing from what happened, what went on out at
The young
house.
people he was with.
Yeah.
Okay. And then did you call Captain Maggot?
Yeah. I've
Maggot?
had Captain Mike Maggot, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And how did that phone call go?
He
He was very kind.
Yes.
We went to his office, to Fremont, to talk to him, and we were there for a good few hours.
And was he able to answer any of your concerns?
no.
The ones he couldn't answer, he planned on looking into, from our understanding.
Okay. And then when was your next contact about?
We had stayed in contact
Okay.
on and off, and he was starting to investigate it. He
Okay.
was
Did he offer at that time? Did he offer any explanation as to why there were these inconsistencies, or why, a death certificate would say such a ludicrous thing on it?
No, he didn't really touch on that. You called the coroner.
I did.
And did you have a conversation with the coroner?
I did.
Okay.
We had just received the death certificate. I was very taken back by the suicide, and called him to to sort of argue. And
And did he? Coroner Wookie, as a rule, I think Emil is still in the room here, does not return our phone calls.
Not once.
Not once.
Not once.
And, we find this particularly irritating because we're members of the public, and he's a public servant who is paid with tax dollars, and when members of the public have inquiries, they shouldn't be, they should be given the courtesy of a return phone call. Did he offer any explanation as to why he thought an accidental suicide was the right way to certify your son's death?
I couldn't quote him word for word, but he was trying to explain to me that, and this is my take on
Sure.
what he said, that if you die by your own hands, whether it was intentional or not, he needed to rule it a suicide. And
Does that make any sense?
And that could be that that was what I understood him to say. That's what I understood him to say.
But and you're being kind. You've been frustrated by Sandusky County officials
Yes.
in the way this has been handled. Do you think your son's death was properly investigated?
That is why we're doing what we're doing now. That's why we went to Dan. They shut it down.
What is it that you hope to learn?
The truth. What happened.
And did you know the people that Jacob was with that night?
Only one.
Only one.
And have you talked to that person?
Yes.
And I don't want you to reveal anything you don't want to reveal, but did that person create doubt in your mind as to the story you were being told?
I've talked to all three of them,
No.
and
There's a lot of inconsistencies.
Can you talk about some of the inconsistencies?
where people were sitting.
Let me ask you this way. What do you think would motivate Sandusky County officials to forego doing a thorough investigation? And I'd throw that out to all three of
Well,
you.
I'll try to answer that. I guess maybe I don't know that we can answer that. It's trying to ask what what their motives are, what's going on in their minds, and obviously no human being can do that. All we know from the facts, Matt, that right in the sheriff's reports, effectively this investigation was closed. It didn't exactly say that, but they ruled this death a suicide within hours of the death. The death occurred at around 9:30, and by midnight, it's in the reports that they're calling it throughout the reports a suicide. And then I believe it was by mid-April, there was a discussion in within the sheriff's department, and this is all documented in their records, that there was a discussion about whether they should retrieve the bullet which was never done until just about a month ago, retrieve the bullet from the attic and do a ballistics test. And that was discussed, it's right in the reports, and the decision was made not to do that. And at that point, I believe the word closed, the investigation is closed.
So
Right in their
you have
reports.
a dead young man. You've got a gun, and you've got a bullet up here.
That's right.
But you have nothing that connects the bullet up here to the gun here, except they're in the same room.
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly right.
So in the course of their investigation, the sheriff's department did not even confirm that this weapon was the weapon that killed Jacob Lombardo.
That's correct.
And there was no autopsy.
And there was no fingerprint analysis of the gun. There was no
GSR.
Gunshot residue test. There's no test of the gun. It sat, to my understanding, in the vault somewhere at the Sandusky County Sheriff's Department. I believe it was in a sealed bag, fortunately. So, and apparently what was told, and I guess I'll let you guys speak to this because they didn't say this to me, but through Shannon, I believe, that when asked why didn't they, test the gun, do a test for fingerprints or anything, well, it was too messy. Too messy.
Which isn't the case.
The gun was too messy,
Yes.
and they threw out the clothing. Whose clothing did they throw out?
One of the witnesses.
Okay. So they took the clothing, which was blood spattered, and then threw it out.
Yes.
Because,
They allowed this witness to change their clothes at the house
okay.
before they went to Fremont.
So it's baffling.
Just,
Well,
It's baffling to us, but it's personal to you. It's everything to you.
yes.
Do you believe your son committed suicide?
No.
You're
There's no doubt
you're
in
sure
my
of,
mind.
You're sure of that.
Yes.
That's good. I mean, it's a small morsel, though, with everything you've gone through. But you're confident that your son did not commit suicide.
We know. We know he did not.
But the state has decided he did, or he did it accidentally. And the state, until you filed a lawsuit, was perfectly comfortable with that ruling, despite, there's my phone that I couldn't find earlier, despite the discrepancies. They're comfortable with that, a ruling that says Jacob Larios died by suicide that could have been accidental. They're comfortable with that.
Well, I guess I'll take the lead and try to answer
Go
that
to
one.
you.
I don't know whether they're comfortable or not, Matt, but again, from the facts that we know, it wasn't until the lawsuit was filed that they finally went out, like I said, about maybe 5 weeks ago, retrieved the bullet from the ceiling. Now I understand that the gun has been sent up to BCI in Toledo for testing.
As part of the coroner's inquest.
Yes.
Okay, let's pick it up right there when we come back. We're going to take a short break for a message from our sponsor, Terra State Community College, where there's admissions day next Monday and Tuesday. You can get instant access to admissions at Terra State Community College. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Need college knowledge? During Terra's Instant and Middays, you'll get fast, free acceptance. Change your life in an instant, December 17th and 18th at Terra State Community College. Learn more at terra.edu.
Are you the only one still using the book? Get found at firelands411.com. Half of the internet users today will use a search engine to find a business. Make sure you're found at firelands411.com, an all-local business directory with phone numbers, addresses, and more. Your customers are looking for you. Claim your free listing today at firelands411.com.
Find your passion in healthcare at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu.
So we're here with attorney Dan McGookie and Mike and Shannon Larios. Did I get that right?
Very good.
Okay. And we're talking about the March death of their 19-year-old son and the investigation by the Sandusky County Sheriff's Office. The inadequacy of that investigation is that ultimately is what we're talking about. The inadequacy of the investigation.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, maybe I'll let Mike speak to that, but yes, it's fair to say that the investigation was totally inadequate.
Okay.
But I do want to say this. We've, in the last or so, have retained the services of our own private investigator, Greg Majoy and Brent McConnell. They do business as M&M Investigative Services. And they've done a wonderful job. And I just met with Greg about an hour ago. He gave me an update. And I have to say that he is extremely satisfied at this point with the cooperation that he is now getting with the Sandusky County officials. There is a special prosecutor involved in this case now, a gentleman, an attorney from Tiffin, Dean Henry.
And what is this, and who hired the special prosecutor? Do you know?
Well, I believe Sandusky County did.
As part of the coroner's inquest?
Yes.
So what you're telling me is if you want to get satisfaction from Sandusky County officials, you should hire Dan McGookie or another attorney. You should hire your own private investigation agency.
Well, that's
And maybe then Sandusky County officials will give you the courtesy of responding to your inquiries about the death of your son. So that's what you have to do.
well,
You know, you're soft pedaling this. I'm angry about it.
Consistent with what Mike said a few minutes ago, Matt, I mean, our goal, and I know for a fact I can say this on behalf of Mike and Shannon, is that the only goal, not just the number one goal, the only goal involved from the very beginning, back on March the 2nd for these good people, in early April for me, has been to find out what happened,
Okay,
to get
sure.
to the truth.
To get to the truth.
And consistent with that, we are extremely pleased to hear from Greg Majoy.
That makes sense.
A long-respected law enforcement official from Erie County who served, by the way, more recently in Afghanistan and Iraq and doing forensics work for the military. He tells us that he is satisfied with the cooperation that he's getting from people like Dean Henry, the new prosecutor, and new people who are now acting on behalf of the Sheriff's Department.
And fair enough. And I guess the point I'm making is that public servants should serve the public and not force the public to hire private investigators and private attorneys to get answers to legitimate questions. When do you think this coroner's inquest is going to wrap up?
Well, I've been making predictions in this case way too long. When Mike and Shannon first came to me in April, seriously, I thought a couple phone calls, kind of kick them in the rear end over there, and that would be, I would step out of it and let them do their jobs. Seriously, maybe I was naive, I guess. But it obviously did work out that way. And as I said a few minutes ago, our number one goal, I'm not a criminal investigator. I'm not even a criminal lawyer, mind you, and I don't profess to be. But any person could see that an autopsy should have been done at a minimum, despite, not even to mention all the other things. And so that's what I was fighting toward. And I honestly thought I'll just make a phone call, and for whatever the reason they thought an autopsy wasn't necessary, make a phone call, just get to the right people, they would do that. But months and months and months went by, and then in September we had our own autopsy done.
But you didn't answer the question.
No, I didn't. Typical way.
When do you think the coroner's is it possible that this might be over this year, that you might have answers this year?
I would love that to happen, but I don't know.
We keep hearing things are progressing very well. We're very pleased that the county is looking into things and they're getting along and they're truly moving forward. We're very happy, very grateful. But things don't move quite as fast as we'd like.
You've been waiting a long time already.
286 days.
Oh, jeez.
We wait for that phone to ring. For 9 months. For 286 days, we have waited for the phone to ring. For someone to tell us
Answers.
what happened.
Well, there is a Captain Sean O'Connell
Yep.
Is he still heading up the coroner's inquest, the investigatory part of it?
Yes, and again, Greg McJoy and Brent McConnell have been in constant contact. Greg told me just an hour ago that he's probably talked with Sean O'Connell 3 or 4 times in the last 3 or 4 days. So,
And Sean
now-
O'Connell has concerns about the witness statements, is that
well,
right?
I just read, yes. I think that's a fair statement. And in fact, I believe Emil had probably talked to him more recently than I have, and he was quoted in the paper. I didn't.
Do you recall that quote? It was major inconsistencies in the witness statement.
I believe that's what the paper said. And he didn't say that to me. But I wanted to add, Matt, that just within the last few days, now on top of Sean O'Connell's part in this whole thing, we've got a new special prosecutor too, Dean Henry.
Does the fact that, have we reported that a new special prosecutor's been appointed to this?
Not yet.
Okay. Does the fact that a special prosecutor has been appointed to this suggest that there could be criminal charges, or what does it suggest?
Well, I wouldn't say that it suggests that there's potential criminal charges. I think it just suggests, quite frankly, the obvious, that this case, the circumstances of this case beg for a real investigation. And I don't mind saying that hasn't happened.
It still hasn't, or it's,
I mean,
it's
it hasn't,
currently happening.
It's currently happening, but it hasn't happened until very recently.
And when you say very recently, what?
The last month.
The last month.
Let's say it this way, it hasn't happened till after we filed that lawsuit on October the 19th.
So then it would be a fairly fair assumption to think that the investigation is going to come to a conclusion soon. If they've been investigating it thoroughly for a month, they should be able to conclude something here soon. Maybe
Now-
that's just me thinking.
Well, you asked before if we thought that the investigation would be concluded this year. Well, that's a little over 2 weeks from now, so I don't think it's going to be, unfortunately, I wish it were, but I don't think it's going to be concluded quite that fast. We're hopeful, realistically, that within the next couple months that it would be concluded.
And there are issues. You had to have an autopsy performed on your son at your expense.
Yes.
Would you be seeking reimbursement for that? I mean, I imagine that's an expensive thing. I mean,
We're focused on finding out the truth
The
and what
truth.
happened
And-
right now. Yes.
do you want to address that?
Well, yeah, I would, Matt. I think, in fairness, again, by far and away, as I said a few minutes ago, the only concern is to get to the truth. But because it is strictly out-of-pocket costs, I would think that it would be appropriate, at a minimum, for Sandusky County to reimburse the costs of the autopsy, transporting the body to Pittsburgh for the autopsy. This is all very expensive.
And your son's body was returned in the same day.
And we've got the cost, and which is, believe me, worth every penny of it, but there's still a cost with, for example, Greg McJoy. And I mean, all of these things have just racked up. It's been very expensive. And
So it would be reasonable to expect that the county would bear the cost of this.
Well,
Not that that's what's important. You've stated that what's important for you and your family is
I
the
can't
truth.
live the rest of my life not knowing what happened to my son at that house.
I understand.
So
That's what's
What's that
important
worth?
to you. Yep.
to a large degree, Matt, I've lived with these good people, almost every day for the last 8 months regarding this case, and even now, it's hard for me to imagine as a parent not knowing what happened, they can't even get on with the grieving process. And their lives have literally been put on hold for 9 months now because of this inexcusable conduct that, that has happened.
But we're getting somewhere.
And you're hopeful,
We're
and you're
getting
hopeful,
somewhere.
and that's,
You get hopeful. I've been hopeful how many times?
Yeah.
And
3.
and you get let down.
when you
and
say
so-
3,
The first time Captain Maggot, he did his own detective, and we got really nowhere with that. That was shut down, and then we went to see Star Walt, and after a little bit of a thing, he put another detective on it from the prosecutor's office. He did his thing, and
Just
are you
no
able
answers.
to tell me what happened? No. And then now after the inquest, Sean O'Connell and
you're hopeful
Zach,
again.
they've probably done more than those two have probably done more through Sandusky County. They haven't done more than we have. This burden of proof's been on our shoulders this whole time of trying to find out what happened. But those two probably have done the most.
We're hopeful with them. We try not to get too hopeful.
Sure.
Because it's
Sure.
too painful
Sure.
when you don't get an answer.
So, if Emil is still with us, off camera, if we were to ask Sheriff Kyle Overmeyer and John Wookie, the coroner, and Thomas Starwalt, if they would be on this program next week to address these concerns, what do you think they would say, Emil?
They've said it. I mean, not they. I've talked to Starwalt and Overmeyer about this, and both of them, when I asked them why this has happened, it's a metaphoric shrugging of the shoulders. I mean, they don't have an answer. When they were out retrieving the bullet, I went to Overmeyer was in an SUV parked nearby. I went and asked him why it took this long to retrieve the bullet, and he had no answer.
And you drove away.
And he drove away directly after that.
See, newspaper people, such as Emil, and me.
Who's great, by the way.
Emil is great. He really is. And Jason Worley. We're suspicious by nature. We suspect everything, always. And this is just weird behavior.
That's what struck me. I mean,
This is weird behavior.
I
every
must
step
have
of the
newspaper
way.
blood in
And
me.
by the way, I told you off camera, and I want to say it on camera that, and I can speak from the heart and in all sincerity say this. But for the absolutely fine investigative work done by Emil and by you, Matt, and the Register as a whole, we wouldn't even be sitting right here right now. This investigation, despite our lawsuit, I'm completely convinced that this would have been just shut down. I mean, we would have had our right to a day in court, but it would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get to where we're at right now. So I think the paper has exemplified the finest in the tradition of the American press, and I don't say that to be patronizing. I say it because it's the truth.
I think you're right.
I listen.
It has caused a witness to come forward with some of the stories.
Yes, and
tell us.
I'm being a bit facetious. That's what we do. That's what we try to do. That's what we strive to be an advocate. Certainly, you teed it up, and you worked hard to get the justice, the answers that you're asking for, which are reasonable. There's nothing unreasonable about your inquiries. Just, you would think on a human compassion basis that they would sit down with you and give you the truth, no matter how ugly it was, about their missteps. So I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you keep us informed. And I do appreciate your comments about the register, but it's what, you know, as we often say, it's who we are. And what do we often say? Where's Cheryl when you need her? It's who we are. It's what we do. I mean, that's what we do. So we are incredibly, you know.
Emil often says to me that he deserves a raise.
He does. He does. He does.
No, you did say that.
He absolutely does. But you know, I do appreciate it, and you know, I wish the best for your family in getting the answers you want. We'll continue to report this. And I hope you get what you're looking for. I think you will, because you're fighting for it.
Appreciate
And
that.
I'm inspired that you didn't stop fighting. And more people need to be like you. And you.
That was said with love.
I think
Thank you for your
you're
comments.
welcome. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or anything at all? Do you want to?
We're just grateful that everybody's working together now.
Okay.
We're very grateful.
Okay. I wish you good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the program today, and Dan, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you,
And
man.
Emil Whitus, thank you very much for being on the program as well.
Anytime, Matt.
That's it for this edition of Between the Lines. We're not